Those bureaucracies, which I think it's fair to call the most powerful bureaucracies humankind has ever known, have their own vested interest in seeing the United States embark on more and more initiatives as long as they can expand their market, quote unquote. They were much more concerned with their own business expanding the drone war than they were about what was happening to Al-Qaeda. I call it a bait and switch operation. The bait was that it's all part of the global war on terrorism. The reality was that that really had nothing to do with it. I mean, literally speaking, the people who designed these wars absolutely did not care about Al-Qaeda. That was not the purpose of what they were doing at all. If they did care about Al-Qaeda, it would have stopped. That was so clear. Those drone wars in both countries were building popular support for Al-Qaeda, turning people against the United States.
Where now, this is 6 years ago, Osama bin Laden was assassinated, I believe on this day. But his strategy, speaking of bait, was essentially, I mean, he may have had a willing partner, I would argue, with the Pentagon. The Cold War had ended. They had no justification for this spending anymore. They needed a new source to justify a $600, $700 billion annual appropriation. And bin Laden baited the Americans into coming in.
We're in a fix in terms of the interests of the American people. Their interests are short-term interests that have to do with their own popularity, their own power, their own resources. They just don't connect with the real interests of the American people. Not just since 2001, but since Vietnam. Vietnam began a whole new series of wars. I can document, and I will document in my book, how the war complex lobbied for, put pressure on the White House to carry out the use of force in their own interests.
If we have any hope of real foreign policy change, more Americans need to understand that. We need to burst this bubble, this myth about good guys and bad guys and all of that.
We need to create a new narrative which talks about the real bad guys, the bad guys who have been really betraying the interests of the American people for decades.